Hello, I'm Danny Rodriguez, Wildlife Manager with the Arizona Game Fish Department, and tonight on Arizona's Wildlife Views, we take you somewhere to Joseph City, just east of Winslow, where rock art and ancient history collide, and later, the incredible comeback of the Willow Beach hatchery and why the once empty Lake Mojave is now full of trout. All this and more on Arizona Wildlife Views.
Arizona Wildlife Views is brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Hello, we're here at Shoofly Village, Indian Ruins, just outside of Payson. This place was once occupied between 1000 and 1200 AD. Places like this exist everywhere in Arizona, including longtime rancher Brantley Baird's place in Joseph City between Winslow and Holbrook. He lives on land that has one of the most stunning collections of petroglyphs in the nation. Take a look at the Rock Art Canyon Ranch.
And that lightning had hit that tree right in the dead center.
Brantley Baird was born to be a storyteller.
But he said if you did die in there, he said they knock a hole in the north wall. That relieves your spirit.
Under a bright sky on his 5,000-acre ranch between Winslow and Holbrook, Brantley is giving a group tour of his Rock Art Canyon Ranch.
You shut the door, it's dark in here, so you got to have light. Another thing, you got to get rid of the smoke in your fire. Another thing, ventilation. But there's one main thing. You see that square right there? What'd that tell you? Come on, folks. Huh?
Time of day.
Time of day. That's exactly right. Time of day, time of year.
Brantley's parents purchased the ranch to raise cattle.
We came here in 1945. Is when we come here. At that point in time, we knew the petroglyphs were here, but we wasn't worrying about the petroglyphs. We was trying to make a living with some cows, and that's back then, that's all you got was just a living.
More than 23 years ago, Brantley began giving tours of the Hogans and thousands of ancient artifacts found on the property. But there's always been one specific historical spot on the property that he saves for last. And it's why the ranch is world famous in some circles.
Today, folks, we're in an area called Shovelin, C-H-E-V-E-L-O-N, Shovelin Canyon. The canyon that runs from Heber up on the mountain into the Little Colorado River. It runs in this part of the canyon water the year round. The petroglyphs on the canyon walls are solid on both sides of the canyon for about a quarter of a mile. There are thousands of petroglyphs here in the canyon. We have the canyon on the National Register of Historical Places. Dr. Don Weaver out of Northern Arizona University taught archaeology there for years. They spent 5 years here, 3 weeks a year in this canyon, just recording this site.
It's an anthropologist's dream, and researchers from the Smithsonian Institution, the Heard Museum, the U of A, and NAU have been digging and studying sites on the property for several years now.
The stuff that they uncover, we have them leave it open, and we show the folks how they lived. We've got some beautiful pueblos and a beautiful kiva that has been uncovered, and we've built structures over it to preserve it. It's always, hopefully it'll always be there for the folks to see. Absolutely beautiful. They date back, as near as we understand, 12 to 1500 years.
The artifacts, the petroglyphs, it's all fascinating stuff. But Brantley, that rangy cowboy, is the real tour de force.
he's a real cowboy. He's great. He definitely knows this area. He knows the land, he knows the history. He's not your typical tour guide.
The artifacts that he's recovered from the property are just absolutely amazing. We've been across the country, and the artifacts that we've seen here are second to none.
It's beautiful.
What a unique experience.
At the very end, you have this beautiful stream that in the middle of the desert you wouldn't expect.
This canyon, yeah, it's just an amazing experience. What a way to end a tour, to be left on your own to explore this beautiful canyon.
This is how it's supposed to be. Rainbow trout from the Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery splashing down into the Colorado River. It's been this way since the 1960s, but in 2013, the splish splash went silent when rainbow trout production at Willow Beach ended abruptly. More on that in a moment, but first a little background. Operated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery was built in 1959 on the Arizona side of the Colorado River, about 11 miles south of Hoover Dam.
We raise rainbow trout for recreational fishing opportunities, and we also raise endangered razorback suckers that are endangered to the Colorado River.
Mark Olson is the hatchery manager.
And I just oversee day-to-day operations of this facility. You're looking at a trout raceway. These fish are approximately 12 inches long. And those are fish that are biggest fish on station right now, and they will be the first ones to be stocked out.
In 2013, these trout raceways went dry. An aging pipeline that carried water from the bottom of Lake Mojave up to the raceways failed when the lake dropped to unusually low levels.
3 feet lower than it usually drops. And we had a pipeline failure prior to that. And so the existing pipeline that fed our trout water supply line was actually higher in the water column than we anticipated, and we actually dewatered the hatchery.
21,000 fish died, 11,000 were saved, but the future of the hatchery's sport fish operation was far from certain, given the $1 million price tag on pipeline repairs.
Really are the only facility producing trout in this local area here.
If Willow Beach were to stop raising trout, it would be a devastating loss to the local economy.
It provides these fishing opportunities, and people come and spend money on hotels and fuel and boats and things like that just to come fish trout.
$75 million. That's what anglers spend on their fishing trips to Mojave County each year, according to a 2001 report prepared by ASU for Game and Fish. And it's estimated that sport fishing supports about 1,700 local jobs. The threat of losing such a critical economic driver led to lots of cooperation.
Arizona Game and Fish, Mojave County, Arizona, or U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we all got together, we had a bunch of engineers get together and figure out a solution to the problem. That is it.
The result? A new water intake system on a floating platform.
We have to go through a series of fences, gates.
Paid for jointly by the Fish and Wildlife Service and Game and Fish. It was made possible thanks to political support from Senator John McCain, Senator Jeff Flake, Congressman Paul Gosar, and Mojave County Supervisor Hildy Angus.
So right now we're currently pumping with that new system. It was put in place, I guess construction finished in August of 16, and came up with a floating pump system versus our old system was a pipeline on the bottom of the river. And we're here. This is a redundant system for pumping river water to our trout. And you can see we have 200 horsepower motors driving pumps, obviously on a big dock system, big floating system, which actually floats up and down with the water levels, because Lake Mojave actually fluctuates about 10 vertical feet annually. This pumping system has kind of a unique cleaning system to it. We have 4 intakes, 2 for each pump, and they're all screened, and the screens have an air burst system on them. So we have an air compressor out here, and it shoots a big burst of air and cleans all the vegetation and silt off the screens. It's kind of a neat system. So it pulls in water into this central elbow here, and then it's just sent up through this pipe, up the hill, and into our first bank of raceways. These are the fish that we're going to be stocking out tomorrow down below Davis Dam. There's about 2,500 fish in here. These fish came from Arizona Game and Fish for us to kind of jumpstart our production here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be stocking fish for another 6 to 8 months probably.
Arizona Game and Fish donated about 90,000 4-inch trout. Many of them are now about 12 inches long, and on the morning of January 12, 2017, hatchery personnel prepare them for stocking.
We'll put those on the distribution truck with a fish pump. It's a pneumatic-driven pump that puts the fish and the water up into the tower, and the water decants off and the fish slide into the truck.
After loading the truck with fish, Olson begins the 85-mile drive south to Bullhead City.
It's a long time coming, yeah. So when we transport fish, periodically we stop and check the dissolved oxygen levels in the tanks. So you can see this tank is running 10 milligrams per liter, about 115% of saturation. We don't want to go too much above that, but they're pretty happy. They have all the oxygen they need in there to survive the trip.
Anglers are waiting and watching when the truck pulls up to the river's edge.
Water's up, should be good fishing. We haven't stocked down here for a couple of years now since we had our pipeline failure at Willow Beach. Here they go.
Hundreds of fish pour into the river at this location.
1,300 fish here.
Then more fish are stocked just a few miles downstream. The Willow Beach hatchery is back in business, keeping anglers happy and the local economy afloat.
Everyone kind of knows that hummingbirds are attracted to things that are red. And I think most everyone knows that they like to feed from flowers that are trumpet-shaped. Anything that's kind of got a bright red or orange tone in particular is something they're going to be attracted to. And luckily there's a lot of plants here in the desert that are perfectly suited to be hummingbird feeders, and several of those are in bloom here today. The main one you're going to see is something we call yellow bells or Tacoma stands. They actually can be arranged from yellow to orange to red, but that's a major attractor for hummingbirds. Salvias of all varieties are another very heat-hardy species that does well here and that hummingbirds love. We've got a red salvia actually right behind me here. Other ones they like are honeysuckle. They're fond of honeysuckle. Lilies, we've got a red lily in bloom right now that they're going to be attracted to. They don't actually have a very strong sense of smell. So visual attraction is really what they're all about. So bright flowers that have the right shape for their little beaks to get in and sip nectar out are what they're looking for. So this is another plant that's great for the gardens here in the valley. It's a Mexican native called a firecracker bush, or a hummingbird bush actually. So obviously it's a favorite with that red tubular flower on it of the local hummingbirds, and it's great in our soil and in our heat because it's straight out of Mexico. So this is foxglove, also known as digitalis. Yeah, it's another one that's got a nice tubular shape and a bright color that the hummingbirds are attracted to, and lots of nectar down in at the base of that trumpet for them to lap up with their groovy little tongues. So here we have two great hummingbird attractors in bright colors. The taller one is called a red pentas, and that's really commonly available in like big box nurseries, and so is the shorter one, which is called a Sweet William or dianthus. Both of those are very commonly available in nurseries and very popular with the hummingbirds. So for people who prefer to grow edibles in their garden, there's a lot of options for feeding the hummingbirds as well. This is a pomegranate that has that beautiful red tube-shaped flower that hummingbirds will feed from, and at the end of it you get pomegranate, so there's a bonus. This is another variety of the many salvias that we can grow here. This one is a cultivar called Wendy's Wish. It's got kind of a wider leaf than the little Greggy eyes we saw, but it's another one that's got the shape and color. Oh, so this is a succulent. That's another Mexican native. It's called red yucca or false sarsaparilla. And this one is, so if you're looking for something that's less of a shrub and more of a succulent plant, this is a great choice. And another one that's very heat hardy and very sun hardy. So this is a pretty little flowering summer annual called an angelonia. Sometimes they also call it a summer snapdragon because it's very heat tolerant compared to the regular snapdragons, but has a very similar little flower, again with that trumpet shape to it. Does very well in the warm season here. Hummingbirds don't only eat nectar. They also eat small insects, and quite a few. They're actually one of the major sort of consumers of insects amongst the bird kingdom. So, things that we can do to help them with that part of their diet are to, for example, let our herbs actually flower out instead of just picking them all before they flower. Those flowers actually attract an enormous number of small flying insects that the hummingbirds can then zoom by and eat. Also, if you've got a compost bin, there's little gnats and things that fly up from the compost. I notice whenever I lift up my compost bin lid and start working with it, the hummingbirds will start dive bombing because they're going after all these little insects in my compost. So anything we can kind of do to encourage tiny flying insects, or just by letting things flower out and attract not only the hummingbirds with a diversity of flowers that are going to attract their attention, but is also going to attract other creatures that the hummingbirds rely on, like tiny insects. So having a whole diverse system really is part of what encourages a hummingbird to come and stay. Also having a water source, especially a running or misting water source, is something that attracts hummingbirds because they need to drink too. I only recently found out a lot of hummingbird feeders. Well, number one, I think a lot of people know that you're not supposed to put red food coloring into the hummingbird feeder. As long as you've got something red on it, they'll find it. And the food coloring may be harmful to their systems. Another thing people may not realize is that sometimes those hummingbird feeders will have little yellow accents on them, but those actually may attract wasps and bees. So our recommendation is kind of to remove those yellow elements, paint them red, or just remove them altogether, and that way you won't get wasps and bees competing with your hummingbirds. It's good to have feeders out there, it really is. It helps them out, but sort of, within parameters, the correct proportion of water to sugar, which is typically 4 parts water to 1 part sugar, and just not putting anything else in there and making sure you're cleaning it out regularly so mildew doesn't get in there, which can actually harm the hummingbirds if they ingest it.
I've got various kinds of wood. I've got mesquite, I've got alligator juniper, I've got Arizona walnut, I've got some pecan.
In his home garage turned wood shop, Queen Creek resident Ammon Talbot uses Arizona hardwoods to produce the perfect sound. The instruments he makes might not appeal to the symphony crowd. But that's okay, because the audience he's targeting is quite literally dying to hear them. The sultry sounds of Talbot's Little Creek calls have seduced many a wild turkey onto someone's supper table.
This is a glass call. It hits in a mesquite pot. Okay, this call is the first pot call that I had made with that Arizona walnut wood. This is a call I take with me in the woods every year when I go out turkey hunting. The turkey feathers on the wall back there was my wife's little brother's, and I was able to call in that turkey using this call. Today I've chosen mesquite to work with. The pot calls that we're going to be making today, I make them in a variety of different surfaces. Yeah, this is copper, this is glass, this is ceramic, this is aluminum, and these 3 are slate. So yeah, there's a lot of different surfaces. I also have crystal. Some calls might sound a little higher pitch. You maybe sound like a younger bird, whereas other surfaces might be a deeper, more raspy pitch to sound like an older bird. Yeah, this striker is a pecan wood with a Arizona grown Indian corn insert, and then it has a the coat dowel. You hold it almost, not quite 90 degrees, but maybe back a little bit further, and then you're just drawing little ovals or little circles to create the yelp. It is a musical instrument, and if you take care of it, you know, they'll be able to last you your whole life. And I mean, they're calls that you can hand down to your kids, and they can be around for generations. And now it's a clean cut pot ready to cut out and then turn on the lathe. When I was young, we lived in southern Utah, and my dad, he hunted deer every single year. Going out with him every year was something I looked forward to. And then when we moved to Arizona, we met Marvin Robbins, who was real big in the Turkey Federation, and ever since then I've been hooked on turkey hunting. It's calling them in, you know, seeing their reactions to the sounds. It's everything. It's the campfires, it's time with family, it's seeing nature, it's everything about it. It's the whole experience, you know. I'd started buying calls from Marvin Robbins. In particular, he had a mouth call that I really liked. When he passed away, the first thing that hit me is, where am I going to find some more of those mouth calls? And then talking with my friends, I decided to, you know, get into making turkey calls. We're going to turn the edge on the lathe and cut our grip into it, and then smooth it so it's round all the way. So this is a mouth diaphragm call. It has latex reeds that vibrate against each other. And the nice thing about using this type of call is it's hands-free, there's no motion. And with turkeys are all eyesight. It's nice to be able to not have to move your hands and to be able to keep your hands on your gun. It takes a little getting used to. It's probably the call that, for me, that took the most time and practice to become efficient with. On my way to and from work in February or March, I'll have a mouth call, and I'll put in a CD that has turkey sounds, and, you know, I'll talk back to the CD, so it's kind of fun. It gets me ready for the season. When I first got into turkey hunting, one of the first calls I bought was a box call. I really didn't know how to use it, and so turkeys just all ran away from me. It's a call that I'd wanted to make for a long time. After starting with the pot calls, this was the next step for me. Originally, I thought, oh, the only thing you can do with a box call is make yelps, you know, but it will make almost every sound in the turkey woods. It'll even gobble. Like if you get a loose rubber band like this, you can take it and it's practice, you know. It's using it, practicing it. So this is actually another call that was cut out earlier and finished earlier, and now it's ready to receive the soundboard. It has the pedestals glued in, and it's ready to receive a soundboard. This one is a little different than most of the other types. It's a wing bone call, and it's made from the 3 bones out of a turkey wing. If you were to eat a chicken wing, this is the drumstick, and then out of that next joint, these are the next 2 bones, and those are the 3 bones you use to make a turkey wing bone call. You're kind of kissing the end of this, and to make the sound. This was really my first successful usable turkey call that I was able to make. You can tell it's a little bit rougher. I mean, I've got glue all over the place. It's a slate calling surface over a glass soundboard. You'll notice on the back all these signatures from people all over the country, in Missouri, in New York. I hunted in Hawaii, and I was able to tagged 2 birds with this call. From there, I sent it to Mississippi, where a friend of mine was able to harvest a bird with the call. He sent it to Kentucky, and it traveled quite a few miles just to kind of see how my calls would do across the country. If I'm not mistaken, this call took part in calling in and killing 5 or 6 birds. This is actually a copper call. So this is a piece of copper that's going to be used as a calling surface in this call. A lot of people in Tucson that are close to the mesquite trees and in the copper industry really like this call. An Arizona call all around mesquite in copper pot. Every year I'm trying to do something a little bit different, maybe change some of the things I'm doing to get it to sound better. Sometimes they don't work and they end up as firewood, but I think, honestly, feel like the best call that I made was the last call that came out of my wood shop.
You know we're lucky to live in this incredibly diverse state, so whether you bring your gun or your camera, get out and enjoy those Arizona wildlife views. We'll see you next time.